Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, officers and members. I think I ought to also say good evening to our cadets up there. When I arrived this evening, I wondered where the boat was, but just a little bit of a pun, but welcome. As always, there's a little bit of housekeeping I must read out to you. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door, which is the one on my right, and also through the corridor to the stairs. Do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it is safe to come back into the chamber. Is there any person going to film this planning meeting tonight? Could they please show? I don't think so. And just to remind members that we are being live streamed on Thanet Council's YouTube channel. Would everybody present please ensure that the mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to receive phone calls in the chamber whilst the meeting is in progress. Are there any members who are going to speak who aren't on the committee, speaking under 20.1? No, thank you very much. Public speaking. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Would members please make a note? Item 4B, Upton County Primary School, Edging Road, Broadstairs. Item 4C, Boat Park, Eastcliff Promenade, Broadstairs. And item 4D, Seagulls, Cliff Promenade, Broadstairs. On that point, I'm going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. A point of information for members on agenda item 4B this evening, which is the Upton School application. On the plan condition, which is number 2, a couple of errors have been identified. One is that the condition as drafted refers to a plan ending 104 when there is no plan under consideration with that reference. So this plan is removed from the recommended condition. In addition, Plan 303 Revision A identifies the proposed colour of the building in question as cream, but the annotation refers to an incorrect rail number, and this has also been updated in the condition to confirm the cream colour proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I do have apologies from Councillor Orban and substituted by Councillor Alan Curry. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Agenda item 2, are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 18th of August 2021. Do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee held on that date be approved and signed by myself? Could I have a proposal, please? Several hands going up. Councillor Hart. And a seconder, please. Councillor Paul. Do you all agree? Thank you, members. Item 4, the schedule of planning applications and public speaking. Once again, we still haven't had a day out yet, but if there are any site visits, it will be on, or they will be held on the 1st of October, which once again is a Friday. Agenda item 4B, the planning application for approval, which is Upton County Primary School, Edging Road in Broadstairs. Speaking in favour is Mr. Pester. Is Mr. Pester here? Thank you, sir. Well, what time? Is that funny?
That's good timing.
That was good timing. Mr. Pester, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Let me just get my notes here. Okay, so evening everyone. I just want to got some notes here just to mention on the application. So this application is to replace an existing sports facility for pupils, which is totally unfit for purpose, with a new one intended primarily for their use. The school has received the grant of government funds for this purpose. In accordance with government policy, the school will offer the sports hall as an asset for use by the wider community when not in use for the school. This relatively small size of the building, this is not a full-size sports centre, means that it will only be suitable for a range of activity involving limited numbers: badminton, keep fit groups, yoga, dance class, etc. Councillors will remember that an application for this facility was originally submitted in November and planning permission was granted in March. Unfortunately, subsequent technical surveys indicate that the site on the school field, originally proposed for the new sports hall on the imprint of the existing building, contained a substantial amount of infill. This would have necessitated substantially more complex foundations than those originally proposed, at an additional cost of over £90,000. Grant funds are not available for this additional expenditure, nor does the school have the capacity to finance this. This has necessitated placing the building elsewhere on the school site. Because of the need to avoid objection from Sport England about incursion into playing field space, the options for this are limited, and the current application places the new building closer to Edge End Road than the previous one. This has understandably given rise to concern from residents. The school has met with residents, local councillors and the planning officer, and has agreed to take a number of steps to ameliorate any impact on residents. And just further note, the location was taking into account minimum distances away from trees to prevent further impact on the cost of the project. That's an overview from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bester. Raising points of concern, Mr. McCulloch.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mrs. Suttle, who emailed me yesterday, clearing up a number of points that I was otherwise going to raise this evening. When this application was submitted, I lodged objections based on the location and the colour. I've never objected to the idea of a sports hall, merely the details. We had a face-to-face meeting on the 14th of June between residents, the school and Mr. Pester, where a greater understanding of the residents' concerns was manifested and a change of colour from recycling bin blue to cream was agreed. There's a subsequent site visit by the case officer led to a change in orientation to one that we, the residents, had previously suggested on the 14th of June, and which we had formally submitted to the planning department on the 16th of June. Following a reappraisal of the pitch layout, Sport England withdrew their objection, which in any event was based on an incorrect assessment of the number of football pitches on the site. So we've now reached an acceptable compromise, the one that residents had proposed, but which was rejected at the 14th of June meeting with the school. There are a number of small issues outstanding relating to the pedestrian gate on Broadstairs Road and the car parking, including the noise, but these are not really planning issues, and therefore we'll be addressing them directly with the school. At the Broadstairs and St Peter's planning meeting, Councillor Moore was highly critical of the lack of communication between the school and residents. If there'd been consultation prior to the lodging of the application, school might well have their sports hall by now, or at least it would be under construction. Many of the residents of this road are professional people, many are retired, but we number lawyers, construction engineers, town planners, head teachers, journalists, and others. I've lost my track for a minute. There we go. Anyway, I'm hoping now that following this rather lengthy process that lessons have been learnt, and that in future the school understands that it's part of this neighbourhood with the same obligations to its neighbours as I have to mine. The school have got my email address, and I'd be happy to assist in the establishment of proper communication channels between us and them. And finally, if I've got the time, can I thank Councillor Maeve Saunders and Councillor Ros Binks for their guidance and help throughout this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCulloch. I'll now ask the planning officer to outline this application. And could you turn your microphone off, please? Push the button. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the application site outlined in red. So this is the school located here. This is Edge End Road on the right-hand side here, and we have Roadside Road to the top of this slide. This is an aerial view of the school. So the existing sports hall is in this location here with a swimming pool building to the front here. This is photos of the existing sports hall and inside, so you can see the need for this replacement facility. This is the sports pitch next to the sports hall building. So on the left hand side, this is the swimming pool building with the sports hall behind it. So this is the location of the proposed sports hall. So just a few views of that. So again, in this location here, so you can see there's currently a pitch here at the moment. So the proposal was to relocate this pitch further off to the side here. And then again, this is the location of the pitch here. This is the existing pedestrian link that runs through to Broadstairs Road. This here is the nearest neighbouring property to the site. And then looking again back towards the front of the site, so Edge End Road runs along here behind these trees. This area here is the footpath link, and this area here is the location of the proposed sports hall. And then again, just from the rear looking towards it, so again the existing swimming pool buildings on the right here with the existing sports hall behind it. And again there, this is taken from Edge End Road looking towards the site. So at the moment there's parking to the front, and then there's some tree screening behind it, and then the proposed sports hall will be behind those. And again, another view. So this proposed sports pitch is in this location here behind the trees. And again, another view here. And then this is just a view taken at a different time of year, just showing the fact that there will be some visibility of the sports hall, but also showing how far back the sports hall will be. So it'll be located behind this fence in here, which is the pedestrian link. So again, this is showing here the proposed demolition, which is of this building here. This plan shows the previous approval. So this was the previous approval for the sports hall. So it was intended originally to relocate the building replace the building on the existing sports hall site. As mentioned, it's not been possible to do that due to ground conditions, which is why alternative locations have been looked at. This is now the proposal. So again, this was the previous location here, and it's now intended to move this sports hall further over onto the site of the existing sports pitch. So this plan, the plan originally submitted showed the building wider, so it was turned around, so it's orientated with the wider elevation facing Edge End Road, which also meant it was closer to the existing neighbouring properties. And there was also concern about its distance to the existing buildings and the loss of space here. So this is the amended plan, reorientated the building so that it's a narrower elevation facing onto Edge End Road, creating a greater distance to the neighbours. Again, this is the previous plan showing the previous siting of the building, and then it was intended to replace the sports pitch by moving it over slightly. The intention now is to move it over quite a bit further, but there's still space in order to achieve this. So following the amended plan, there was a concern raised by Sport England, who were concerned that it wasn't possible to replace this pitch, but then this plan was submitted showing that there is space in order to achieve that, and then Sport England have removed their objection. This was the existing site plan, and this is the proposed site plan. So the hall will accommodate two courts inside the sport building, and then this front smaller section will be the changing facilities and toilets to serve the sports hall. This is the elevation facing the road, so you can see it's a narrower elevation. Amendments have also looked at the materials. So originally this was the blue metal cladding for the whole building. So now it's cream metal cladding, and then you can see here where there's darker shading, this is timber cladding, which will add a bit more interest to that elevation. And there's also timber cladding on the smaller elevation as well, fronting the road. This is the rear elevation and the side elevation. So you can see there's high level windows in the building, it's intended that these will be non-opening windows in order to reduce any noise impact to the neighbours. Again, this is showing the layout, so it's showing the 2 courts that you can get inside, and then the changing facilities at the front. So this would be available for community use. And then this is showing the design of the building. So again, you can see the cream colour now and the timber clad into the front and breaking up that large elevation. This is the existing street scene, so the school is on the left-hand side here, the neighbouring property on the right-hand side here, and the building is going in this location here. So you can see it's quite a tall building compared to the existing school buildings, but it's necessary for the activities that they're looking to serve within the building. But by pushing it over through these amendments, it's closer to the existing buildings and again the greater distance to the neighbours. So there's, as I said, there's previously a building on the site was approved. It's a community facility which we would support. Through the amendments, it's now a greater distance to the neighbours. There's now restrictive conditions as well on the consent that limit noise. It limits the hours of use of the building, so it can only be used up to 10 o'clock at night. It limits the lighting, so any lighting's turned off at the same time. So the impact on the neighbours is now considered to be acceptable through these amendments. And in changing the colour and the orientation of the building, the impact on the street scene is also considered to be acceptable. So it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. I move the opposite recommendation be adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Councillor Joel Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. This application is the result of a very, very long process of consultation amendments in order to address concerns of the public, Sports England, and the one thing that everyone seems to agree about is that they do want to have a sports hall there. No siting is perfect for everybody, but I do think that every effort has been made to meet the demands and concerns of the residents and of Sports England. And I shall certainly be supporting this application. I'd like to see it going ahead as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Are there any other members wish to speak? Councillor Hallmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see that both parties have entered into conversations about this, as I recommended previously, and it's nice to see that the colour scheme has been looked at to make it more aesthetic for the surrounding area, especially with the wood cladding. The only query I have is, was there any recommendations for extra screening by trees or replanting on this site? At any time, and I know we mentioned it at Town Council, but I'm not sure if it was part of the agreement with this application. Thank you, Chair.
Bear with me, Councillor Moore. Emma.
There's currently no condition for actual replanting, but there is a condition to do with the biodiversity. So condition 6 looks at ecological enhancements within the site, which could actually then include new tree planting. So it does actually say that we would be looking for, it does say details of 3 replacement trees actually, and their species location to be submitted as part of that. So yes, we don't actually know the location at the moment, but it will come in through that condition.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I'd just like to sort of point out to the representative of the school that obviously there is a new campaign next year, the Queen's Green Canopy, where they're looking to plant new trees and specialist trees, and maybe they might want to contact and take that into consideration for further enhancement of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Wing.
As an ex-director of sport in a large comprehensive in the north, I welcome the addition of a sports hall, but I also accept in my previous role that there has to be a juxtaposition with your neighbours and the community, and the school needs to sit within the community. I'm glad compromises have come to, and that we now have a sports hall that sort of meets the needs and concerns of everybody. But I would urge the school to continue its dialogue with the residents, because I know how community use of a sports hall, which I also fully support, can impact on the local community. So it's important that the two parties keep talking as this project moves forward.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Are there any other members wish to speak? Okay, members, I'm going to put this recommendation, which is for approval, to yourselves for the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, members, and that includes me. That is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 4C, which is the planning application for approval for the boat park at Eastcliff Promenade in Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of this application is Miss Scott. You have 3 minutes, Miss Scott.
Good evening. I'm here as Assistant Beaver Scout Leader with First St Peter's in Thanet Sea Scouts, a role I've enjoyed for the past 14 years. Our group are a Sea Scout group with around 120 members between the ages of 6 and 14, divided into Beavers aged 6 to 8, Cubs aged 8 to 10 and Scouts aged 10 to 14. We do not benefit from our own scout hut and land, and traditionally we meet at the associated halls of St Peter's Church and pre-COVID the use of a hall in St George's School. Our scouts meet on Wednesday evenings, otherwise more of our group would have liked to have attended this evening. We are a registered charity with our leaders all volunteers. Scouting offers improvement in children's confidence and teamwork skills, empathy towards one another and learning new skills from a wide range of activities that many children would otherwise not experience. Children of all faiths and abilities are welcomed. We provide a range of water-based activities and training under qualified leaders in sailing, canoeing and kayaking, along teaching general water safety and survival skills, skills that we hope you will agree are essential when living by the sea, but also skills that can provide much enjoyment throughout the children's lives. Our group is recognised by the Royal Navy with group number RN55 and is subject of inspections by the Royal Navy to ensure standards in training are maintained. A small number of our children have chosen to join the Royal Navy, and our current group scout leader is a serving member. Our boats and safety equipment are key to our ongoing success as a group, and the safe and suitable storage of these items is essential. We have been very grateful that for some 30 years we have had use of land at Emco Wheaton to store our equipment. However, with the company now needing the land, alternative suitable storage is essential. Whilst many of us store general activity equipment within our homes, we are unable to accommodate the storage needs of boats and associated equipment, including the some 60+ life preservers that all children must wear when they're on the water. As regular users of the sea off Viking Bay, the proposed boat park will provide an ideal location for the boats with easy access to the beach. The compound will be located adjacent to that used by Broadstairs Sailing Club, which is hidden from view from the main beach area of Viking Bay. Boats are very much expected items to be found adjacent to the sea, and this location will not appear out of place. With waiting lists to join, we are a busy group, which is lucky to have the support of many volunteer leaders who put time and effort into the many activities and boating opportunities we provide to a large number of local children. We very much hope to continue this and ask for your support in approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Scott. I'll ask our planning officer, Annabelle, to outline the report. Thank you.
So, thank you, Chair. This is the application site outlined in red here. The two red rectangles you can see there are the proposed containers. So this is an aerial view of the site. You can see Rectory Road here, the Eastcliff Promenade running along the seafront, and this is the Broadstairs Sailing Club site, which also stores boats and is enclosed in a similar way to what is being proposed for the application site here. So this is a zoomed in view. So this is the site roughly in this location here, and it would follow the line of the neighbouring sailing club, so maintaining an access way along the promenade. And so just some photographs of the site. As you can see, it is screened from the upper levels by the cliff. This is another view, and you can just see the fence on the left hand side of the slide of the Broadstairs Sailing Club. And a third view where you can see, as mentioned previously, that it would not the proposed enclosure would not protrude any further than the Broadstairs Sailing Club site now, and members of the public could freely walk up and down and promenade as they can now. So This plan shows the proposed storage containers. There is a condition on the application which looks for the precise colour of the containers to be submitted and agreed with the local authority. And on the bottom left-hand corner, that's the details of the fencing that's proposed, and it's similar in nature to what you've seen on the Broadstairs sailing site adjoining the proposed application site. The site is within a conservation area, sorry, but it's not considered to be out of keeping with the area. And as has been mentioned, you would expect boats and other facilities like that to be stored within easy access of the seafront. The containers could be considered to be slightly out of keeping, but there is a container of a similar nature on the Broadstairs Sailing Club site, and it is considered of appropriate colours detailing of those containers. They would be acceptable. So the officer recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Annabelle. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members, do anybody wish to speak? Councillor Zeki.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point on the containers. Having seen the storms down there and the damage that is caused down there after the autumn storms, will these containers be actually bolted down, or will they be free-floating when the tide comes in?
Annabelle.
I don't have the precise details, but I would assume they would be fixed in some way to avoid any occurrence of that.
I suggest Councillor Zeki, you go and sit on them. There's a storm. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll follow that advice.
All right. Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's with regard to the colour scheme. My concern is that obviously this is a blank canvas for would-be graffiti artists to keep damaging them. So would it not be a consideration that they blend in a bit better? Maybe they're painted like beach huts. They look like a row of beach huts, so they blend in. We have them on Stone Bay, we have them on Viking Bay, and it just might blend in and deter people from actually graffitiing them if they look like beach huts. It's just my whim. I'm just putting it out there. Thank you.
I'll come to Annabelle. I know my thoughts on that, but...
Well, they are storage containers in the traditional sense that are being proposed. They're not, they will not look like beach huts physically, but and the condition only relates to the colour to be agreed, but there's no reason why a colour could be put forward, or a scheme that could resemble some sort of beach hut colour could be put forward to us to look at.
Thank you, Annabelle.
The only reason I mention that, Chair, is that in Margate Fauna Water Ski Club, they have ISO containers down there for their launch vehicles, and they were unsightly after a while, and TDC Open Spaces have asked them to paint them to blend in, and they were looking to do murals of beach huts across the side so it blended in and looked more aesthetic. It's just a suggestion.
Okay. I would also point out the site is going to be fenced and gated in a similar way to the Broadstairs Sailing Club, so hopefully there won't be too many opportunities for people to get in there and vandalise the containers.
Thank you, Annabelle. Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this potential change of use would be hugely beneficial to the Sea Scouts and therefore to the local community, and I think it should be supported. I'm sure that choice of colours will be sensitive and sensible, but I have seen no reason not to approve this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Do I see any other members wish to speak? Okay, once again, members, I put this to you. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? That is carried. And I'd just like to say that you do a wonderful job. I think we all agree. Keep the good work up. Thank you. I will now let you depart. In order, I should ask, please, and we should get somebody up there with a whistle. Thank you, members. Agenda item 4D is the planning application for deferral of the Seagulls Cliff Promenade in Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of the application, Mr. Brown.
This application has been the subject of discussion with your planning officer, resulting in changes, reducing the scheme and addressing initial concerns relating to issues such as ecology, archaeology, the scale of the building and its relationship with the area. My client thanks your officer for their time and thought to address these issues. The application has been called to committee for two reasons: overdevelopment and being out of keeping with the street scene. These reasons are dismissed using quotes from your officer's report. Overdevelopment implies the scheme covers too much site, the building's too close to boundaries and higher than buildings around it. However, the officer states, and I quote, "The building will be set in from the road by 15 metres, by 5.4 metres from the south boundary and 4.2 metres from the north boundaries, 3.2 metres further away from the boundary than the current dwelling. The building incorporates space to either side of the site, which maintains a sense of space. The building would have a greater degree of separation and not appear visually dominant. The height of the building would be comparable with adjacent buildings." Your officer quotes confirm the proposal is not overdevelopment. Indeed, the separation to boundaries is much greater than on adjacent plots. In terms of street scene, the North Foreland estate has diverse forms of buildings. Large square modernist blocks are commonplace, sitting cheek by jowl with mock Georgian mansions and 1970s chalet bungalows. It is hard to imagine a more diverse and less uniform streetscape. That is the character of the area. Again, I would like to use quotes from your officer to give the planning department view of the streetscape. There are examples within North Foreland of 3-storey flat roof buildings. The design of properties varies considerably. The building's positioning within the plot replicates the existing staggered positioning evident on the existing form of buildings. Your officer makes it clear that the design of the scheme and its siting on the plot are in accordance with the existing character of the area. A scheme for 8 flats in a 3-storey flat roof building on a similar site was allowed at Redriff in North Foreland Avenue with no objections. This scheme and other examples confirm that such proposals are acceptable on the North Foreland estate. I would also remind members that their policies acknowledge a higher requirement for 2-bedroom homes. This scheme provides a more balanced housing provision in an area of predominantly large detached houses. It will also help meet the present shortfall in housing provision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Raising points of concern, Miss Lippington. Miss Lippington. Good evening.
Good evening. I speak on behalf of many residents and organisations who have objected to this proposed development, and I speak against it on the following grounds. Firstly, it is out of keeping with the character of the neighbourhood. All existing properties on Cliff Promenade were built as single dwellings. 3 have been converted to flats, but all using the original footprint and structure. This proposal would mean demolition of the existing house to build 8 flats and an underground car park in what is currently mostly a garden area. It is not intended to develop the whole of the current site for flats, as a large portion is being retained, probably for a further development at a later stage, which will create huge access problems for neighbours in North Foreland Avenue. Currently, there are 20 houses along Cliff Promenade and 4 large empty plots. If planning is granted for Seagulls to build flats, the precedent will have been set and the floodgates open for every other plot to do likewise. We come to the subject of highway safety. Cliff Promenade is about half a mile long, about 5 metres wide, bordered by cliff on one side and grass verge on the other. Parking along the road is discouraged because it's part of the Viking Coastal Path and advertised by visitkent.co.uk as one of the most attractive circular leisure routes in Kent. It is billed as family friendly for walking and cycling and is part of the regional cycle network 15. Heavy traffic during construction and subsequent increase in vehicles from many more residents and their visitors, along with increased deliveries, etc., will create many dangers to pedestrians and cyclists in what is essentially a country road. There would be inadequate parking provision because within this proposal there is an underground car park, but Seagulls is towards the narrowest part of the cliff and in a position where cliff falls have already occurred. Indeed, if we come to it, the aerial photographs submitted in the most recent planning application show recently fallen chalk on the beach at the bottom of the cliff. The intention to build such a car park could have an overwhelming and irreversible impact on the structural integrity and stability of the cliff. We must consider nature conservation as well, and the cliff top is a wildflower meadow and one of the few places in the UK where the very rare and protected lizard orchid grows. Also, for some years now, peregrine falcons have been nesting in the cliff top, and these birds are protected by the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981. So large building work so close to their habitat would be detrimental to their continued existence. On all of these grounds, I hope you will see good reason to reject this application. It is not viable or acceptable for the environment or the neighbourhood, and in no way will it produce any social housing.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the planning officer, which is Annabelle, to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application site outlined in red. We have wayfaring and little wayfaring to the right of the slide, adjoining the property, the application site, and Hucklow to the left with Hardwick House beyond it. And this is Cliff Promenade to the bottom of the slide, and then we have the cliff and the sea. So looking at an aerial photograph, this is the application site outlined in red. Wayfaring and little wayfaring, and Hucklow to this side. And the area along here that you can see is actually a designated roadside nature reserve. So looking at some photographs of the site, the application site, which is Seagulls, is the white building you can just see in the middle here. This is wayfaring and little wayfaring, and this is Hucklow. Moving along the road a bit, the application site would be on the left-hand side of the slide, just off the shot here. And this is wayfaring and little wayfaring, and the houses as the Cliff Promenade carries on. Away now, so we have Seagulls, the application site here. That is the roof of Hucklow, and that is wayfaring and little wayfaring. This is looking with the application site on your right, and this is Hucklow, and this is Hardwick House as you turn the corner there. So this is looking at from the front of the application site. So this is existing Seagulls building, and this is wayfaring on the right hand side of the slide. Sorry, bear with me. Again, this is an upper view of the rear of Seagulls as it stands, and this is wayfaring beyond, and that, as you can see, is a much tighter relationship in terms of the distance between the properties. This is standing in the garden of Seagulls and looking back to the rear of it, and this is actually looking at the rear of Seagulls, and this wall you can see here is actually the edge of wayfaring. As members will have noted, and it has been mentioned tonight, the application has been significantly amended since its original submission. This is actually the original submission here at the bottom, and this is the outline of Seagulls as it stands at the top. The original application proposed 10 flats, 8 two-bedrooms and 2 3-beds, and as you can see, it essentially spanned the whole width of the application site and had little relief in visual terms. So this is the amended scheme. This is the front elevation to the top of the site. And as you can see, it is much smaller. Has been brought in from the edges of the site, so it doesn't span the entire width of the plot. And it has a much more comfortable relationship, I would say, than even with the existing Seagulls building and Hucklow, which sits to its right here. This is the rear of the building, and again, members can see it is staggered, and as you go up in the building, the third floor is set in from the sides, and it has a much more interesting and visual relief to it, rather than the square block that we saw in the initial submission. In terms of materials, we are looking at brickwork, render, and some vertical cladding, wood cladding, which are materials that are within the North Foreland area. So it is considered they are acceptable. The existing building, the Seagulls building, has an overall height to the top of its ridge of 7.3 metres, and the height of this proposed building would be 9.4. But this is not considered to be incompatible with surrounding development, and there has been some three-storey buildings allowed in the vacant plots that sit further along on Cliff Promenade and indeed within North Foreland as a whole. So this is the proposed layout, so you can see the building here, the ramp to the parking, and it might be slightly difficult to see, but you can see the dotted line of Seagulls itself. So this is the underground car parking that's being talked about, and it has provision of 10 spaces to serve the flats, and there are 8 flats in total now being proposed. This is the ground floor plan, and you have 3 flats, 2 looking that way and 1 running the length of the building to the rear. The first floor replicates that setting, so a further 3 2-bedroom flats. And the penthouse, or second floor, has 2 larger units but still 2 bedrooms in that location. And this is the roof plan. So to conclude, the proposed development now would contribute 8 dwellings to the district's housing supply. It's considered appropriate in terms of design and scale and provides a good level of accommodation for future occupiers. There would be no adverse impacts on the residential amenities of surrounding occupiers, highway safety or parking. Concerns have been raised about ecology, particularly in relation to the Roadside Nature Reserve, which, as been mentioned, is directly opposite the site. KCC Ecology have been consulted, and they consider that this matter can be dealt with via condition for a construction management plan to be submitted and agreed, and then a monitoring survey of particularly the nature reserve site to see if there has been any impact from the development, and if there is means of remedying that disturbance would have to be submitted and agreed with us, and a timetable for that to be carried out. There is the requirement for the undertaking to be submitted for the SAM contribution, and it is therefore recommended that members defer and delegate the application for approval, subject to the safeguarding conditions set out in the report and the receipt of the appropriate undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. With the Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Members, do you wish? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. Been quite quiet this evening for me, so
I thought so.
That time I spoke. My concern is we have 8 flats, I believe, all 2 or 3 bedroom. Now we assume, as well, I know where this is really. There's not much space really to go shopping and to catch a bus, to go to school, so everybody's going to drive. You've only got 10 places. You should at least have 16, because everybody's going to need a car, probably 2. He goes to work, she takes the kids to school, etc., etc. Or either way, it might be the other way around. That's, you know. But I mean, I I have a slight concern that there isn't enough provision for parking unless there's going to be some outside, and it is going to end up on the road, which in that area really is probably quite unsightly. So I think that needs to be addressed. I'm slightly concerned about privacy for the neighbours as well, especially as the top flats can probably look straight into their gardens, and the other houses don't have that facility to do that themselves. So that's my only concerns with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application was brought before Broadstairs Town Council Consultee Planning Committee, and we were against it, so I will not be voting for this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Wing?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, is there going to be some excavation in order to create the underground parking area?
Yes, there will be.
So we all live on the chalk cliff, and obviously we have rock falls, we have cliff falls on an annual basis. Has there been any look as to how that excavating that close to the cliff could impact on possible cliff falls?
Not with this application. It wasn't considered necessary because it wasn't on the actual cliff edge to have a cliff stability or land stability survey done. But that would be a matter for building regs. It would obviously have to be constructed in a manner that was appropriate and safe.
I would suggest that's quite risky.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Garner?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple of concerns with this application. Firstly, a minorish concern, which was raised by the KCC Flood and Water Management. I see that the applicant is proposing that surface water runoff discharges into a geocellular soakaway system, which KCC themselves say there's insufficient info for that to assess the feasibility of the proposal. So that's one concern I have. But I think a concern raised by Councillor Wing is my major concern. I mean, as a little bit of background, I went on a walk along that area this week, an organised walk called a Smuggler's Trail, and we were told about the cliff erosion, especially around Kingsgate, Botany Bay, and it was mentioned that up to 15 centimetres a year of cliff is eroded, so quite quickly that's going. And I really have a concern that the construction of this building and the underground car park is likely to, there is quite a significant risk of causing further damage to the cliff face, and I really would need much more assurance that there wasn't going to be any of that damage before I was able to, in all good conscience, support the proposal. And another minor one that was raised, I note in the report that Kent Police have said they cannot recommend the approval, and they've listed 9 outstanding points relating to designing out crime. I know that isn't a major thing, but it's still something that I think should have been dealt with before it came to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Annabelle, Ian? Yes, Ms Livingston, come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up the point about excavation, the report talks about the distance in this instance from the cliff edge, and it's been mentioned, obviously, it's one of the narrower parts of the sort of from cliff edge to front of residential properties along Cliff Promenade. But the sort of the process of excavating will be subject again to building regs, and I appreciate the concern about the risk in terms of that excavation, but obviously it is subject to national legislation to ensure it's done in a safe manner. In terms of the impact on cliff falls, we consider that the distance is sufficient to not result in that, but there is obviously again the provision to make sure that the excavation is carried out in accordance with building regs, and again with that distance it's not considered to be a significant issue. To your point about erosion though, That is something that, again, the council's previously looked at with regards to properties on the sort of cliff edge. We had a property in Pegwell, which in fact went to appeal with regards to it. And again, even though with the rate of erosion that you've identified, the test is usually whether or not a development, well, it certainly used to be, would last 100 years. Effectively, if you build it, will it last sufficient sort of time? And again, because of the distance in this instance away from the cliff, it is considered that is not a major concern that would result in the need to refuse the application, because it's not going to be sustainable development, because obviously it would have to be, it would disappear in 100 years. If I may just pick up the point with regards to overlooking that Councillor Hart mentioned, you'll note that there is a condition specifically related to obscure glazing on the upper windows of the property on either side to avoid overlooking. So I think you can see on the elevation, on one of the side elevations, you've got some of those upper windows. So they are put forward to be obscure glazed to try and avoid any overlooking to lose privacy for neighbouring properties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Sorry, can I just come back on
Certainly,
the
Annabelle.
points about drainage that have been raised? You are quite correct, Councillor Garner, that originally when the application was submitted, there was a detailed drainage strategy which set out exactly all the details of the drainage, but as you correctly say, KCC SUDs were not satisfied with, there was sufficient detail within that. That detailed drainage scheme has now been removed from the application. There is a condition requesting full details of drainage to be submitted and approved in the normal way. So that is no longer an issue.
Thank you for that, Annabelle. Councillor Wing.
Could I just come back to Ian Livingston? So the decision planning made on the structural integrity of the cliff top, was that a decision made by planning alone, or was it a decision made in seeking expert advice of people who understand the structural integrity of chalk cliff faces?
Yeah.
It's a judgment made by planning officers. So no, I can't say that specialist advice was given with regards to cliff chalk faces, but in our opinion, it's not necessary, and that's our professional opinion with regards to the planning considerations in this application.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid there are so many issues with this development. I also have serious concerns about the stability of the cliff face. The parking issues raised by Councillor Hart, I think, are substantial. I think there could be a considerable effect on the biodiversity of this site. I do believe that flats are out of keeping, maybe not overdevelopment, but out of keeping in this area. And as our speaker pointed out, this will result in no social housing, and neither will it result in any affordable housing. In my view, I don't feel I can support this application at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Roseski.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the original proposal and the second proposal does look a lot better. I think looking at the different buildings around North Foreland, I don't see a problem with that building at all. Personally, I think it's far enough away from the cliff. Having an underground parking system, I'm sure that if they needed more parking, they'd have enough room at the top to put a couple of cars if they needed it. Personally, I can't see any problem with it, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roseski. Sorry, Councillor Hopkinson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the excavation issue, I appreciate the extra bit of information on that, but I do still share some concerns about this, given that, the judgments made in the absence of specialists' knowledge on that issue. So I'm still a bit concerned about approving this without that specialist knowledge on that issue.
No. Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Hopkinson. Any other speakers? Councillor Crinden.
I just wanted to double check what the proposal is. What I heard you say didn't tally with what it says on the top of the form, which says defer and delegate. And was that what you said? Yeah, and if so, what is the delegate part?
So as the with this sort of development for residential development, there's a requirement for a unilateral undertaking to secure a financial contribution. The recommendation is to defer and delegate to officers to await the receipt of that legal agreement, for that to be checked over by legal, and then we would approve the development on the basis of the conditions as outlined and the agreement. So it's deferred by members but for approval, so members would be approving it effectively, but with just some formality to deal with afterwards.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other members, once again, members, I'm putting this to you. With the officer recommendation is to defer and delegate. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? That motion has been lost. I turn to Mr. Livingston, as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the main issue that's been raised is the concern with regards to the excavation and the concern about potentially the lack of a professional opinion with regards to whether or not there is an issue with the cliff face. What we would recommend as officers is that we do a sort of two-pronged approach. So it would be deferred back to officers to a combination of seeking further information from the applicant if possible, but also seeking the opinion of the technical services team at the council, who we would involve when looking at structures much closer to the cliff, but to get their advice with regards to both erosion rates and also with regards to potential issues with stability in this area. And then we would report the application back to members following receipt of that information for members of the planning committee to consider.
Thank you, Ian, for that. Members, you understand, I'm going to need a proposal, if you don't mind taking what you've heard, Mr. Livingston, if you agree to that.
I'll propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Roseski. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Crittenden. Members, are you in favour of what you've been told there? Yes. The vote. Okay. Oh, sorry, keep your hands up. Sorry.
It's okay, I've got it.
Okay, include me as well. Against? Abstentions? Right, that suggestion to come back to committee has been carried. Thank you, members. That concludes public speaking for this meeting. If there are any members wish to speak, I'm going to ask the clerk to read out the following applications which are on your agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So the final items on the agenda is 4A, which is for approval. It's the garden centre at Montefiore Avenue in Ramsgate.
Councillor Crittenden.
And the second one is 4E, which is for deferral and delegation again. The old moorings in Brennan Bay Avenue, Birchington. Thank you.
No, okay. Could I ask a proposer for what you've heard there, and then we will debate the garden centre. Proposal, please, for the one application that's not being heard. Councillor Hart, seconder. And do you all agree? Agreed, don't we? Thank you. Thank you, James. Right. Hand you over to Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for a new warehouse building with a canopy at the Ramsgate Garden Centre, which is located on Hearson Road. The site is outlined in red with the blue line denoting the overall garden centre site. So this is an aerial view of the application site. You can see that there's the large parking area to the rear for the garden centre, and then there's the area to the bottom of the image which has a lot of the storage of ancillary pallets and stock for the garden centre. Just looking at that in a bit more detail, so along the bottom of the the picture, you can see Muir Road. To the right of the picture, you've got Brindle Grove, and then Hearson Road is on the left-hand side. So this is a photo showing the location of where the warehouse would be. So the image is showing a view to the south, which is to the back of the properties on Muir Road. This is an image looking to the east towards Brindle Grove. An important point to note here is that there is a land level change between the site of the application to the properties on Brindle Grove. It's between 0.8 and 1 metre higher, the land level on Brindle Grove, and we'll see an image from that, those properties looking back towards this site. And then this is the view from the site looking towards Hearson Road, so you can see various fenced off areas used to store stock, etc. for the garden centre. So we're going to look just at some images from the different roads around there. So first starting with Muir Road, which is to the south. So looking through, if you can see where the mouse pointer is, hopefully that's showing up, through those two sets of terrace properties, looking through to the site, so you can see that there's a tree in the background there, so the warehouse building would be sort of partially visible through the gaps between properties on Muir Road. And then looking from Brindle Grove, which is on the right hand side of the image, you can see here the two properties where the warehouse would sit behind. So this garage roof was the roof of the single story structure that you could see over the fence from the image where you had the bin storage containers previously. So this is the proposed site plan, and I'm just going to go into a little more detail to show you the warehouse. So this has been subject to a previous application which was refused. The application was refused due to the size and scale of the warehouse. What's then now been proposed in this application has changed the size to drop the height of the proposed warehouse and re-site the canopy and the main entrance to the warehouse. The warehouse is proposed to be used in connection with the garden centre, so there is no change of use of land, and there is a particular condition which is being imposed, which means that the warehouse has to be used ancillary to the garden centre. So, and as you've seen, that area is currently being used as open storage to move things, as well as the bins for the commercial unit. So this is just going to go through the elevations of the development. So it looks like a warehouse. You've got grey, goosewing grey as the colour for the unit. So this is a view to the south of the warehouse. So we are, I suppose, looking from the Muir Road properties. If you look on the right hand side of the image, you will see the change in level that occurs to the properties on Brindle Grove. So there's the level change here, so they're excavating the land to ensure to maintain the land level with the canopy down. You can see the existing fence height from which was, the fence was visible in those images shown earlier. This is the elevation facing into the site, so to the west, where the main entrance is going to be. And then this is the view from the car park of the garden centre, so to the north of the site. So this is the view that you would see from Brindle Grove. So you can see that the canopy is the sort of middle line above the fence site. So this is the existing fence, with then the roof pitching away from the site. So if I go back to this image, you can see again the level of canopy on the left hand side, and the whole elevation then the whole roof slope pitching away from that boundary. And so this is the view from the east, but obviously you can see the blue dotted line, the bottom dotted line that crosses the whole plan, shows the boundary fence line. So the roof would be visible, but obviously pitching away from the neighbouring properties. So this is just the layout of the warehouse. It's obviously not got a lot of detail on it, but it does show and confirm the position of the main entrance into that area with the proposed canopy at the rear. And then this is the roof plan, which includes some solar panels which will be installed on the warehouse roof. So the main consideration that we've looked at is relation to living conditions as well as impact on the character and appearance of the area. Due to its location, sort of at the back of the garden centre, it's not considered that the development in itself would affect or significantly impact on the character and appearance of the area. Whilst there will be glimpsed views, they're not overly prominent, and because of the land level changes and distance from the roads around there, it's not considered to cause harm to the character and appearance of the area. The impact on neighbours, though, is something that has been looked at throughout this application to follow up from the last proposal. And obviously the key issue is with regards to the fact that the height has been reduced from this proposal, which is the proposal that was refused. And the concern was, due to its siting, even though there is a distance from the neighbouring properties I believe it's sort of about 15 metres from the rear of properties on Brindle Grove, and it's about 18 metres from the rear of properties on Muir Road. The proposal that you can see in front of you was considered to be harmful by virtue of its height. As mentioned, that has been significantly reduced in this proposal to try and alleviate the impact so that it doesn't appear dominant. And we do consider that the reduction in height and the distance in this instance is sufficient to avoid an impact on outlook from those residents. The other issue is with regards to potential impact on noise and disturbance. So as mentioned, the existing use of the site is ancillary to the garden centre, so it is used for open storage at the moment, and that does obviously result in a noise impact. So there's, there is a benefit to some extent of actually containing any movement of things or storage by putting a warehouse in this location in comparison to what is at the moment for open storage. But at the same time, there is a potential that you formalise the area and you formalise the use by putting a warehouse there. So what's been put forward, which has been conditioned, is a restriction on the hours of use of that warehouse, as well as deliveries and back and forth from that warehouse, to basically start at 7 a.m. in the morning. Now it's worth noting that at the moment there are no restrictions on the time of the use of the garden centre because it was approved in the 70s, and therefore we do think on balance this from this restriction it has led to an improvement in the situation. It certainly doesn't cause harm to the residents following this. Some concerns have been raised, and we have received one additional comment after the submission, after the publishing of the agenda, which raises issues to do with noise as well as light pollution. There is a condition that's proposed that for any lighting, if it's to be installed, information has to come into the department before it is installed, and we would always check lighting with environmental health to ensure that there isn't light pollution to either residential properties or indeed in the wider area, although obviously we are in an urban environment, so it's not considered that there's a need for looking at it for, say, ecology reasons or anything like that. So taking into account the safeguarding conditions and the changes to the proposal, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I approve that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members? Councillor Crichton. But I always do that. I'm sorry, Councillor Hopkinson. I do beg your pardon. I hope you're feeling better, by the way. I understand you've been poorly. Apologies.
This one's actually in my wards and Councillor Moore's as well. And there is a bit of consternation amongst some of the residents about this, and I think there are justified grounds for some of their concerns. Although I do think their concerns are things which could be mitigated for. I do think there's a way to kind of solve them, which I'll come back to in a minute. But they've got 5 points. I just want to mention these 5 things really quickly. As Mr. Livingstone just mentioned, the light pollution issue, but as perhaps what you said mitigates that in the sense that I wasn't aware, and I don't think residents are aware that actually any additional lighting would have to be okayed by the planning department. But the floodlights the garden centre do at the moment cause light pollution, and residents are concerned that could get worse. Noise pollution they are concerned about. So as we were just talking about, this provides for traffic to come in and out of the warehouse from 7 a.m. 5 days a week. and so residents are concerned that that wouldn't be, it would be very disruptive and not fair to them. And I think on the first version of this, it was at 8 a.m. And the environment officer on the report does say metal cladding, and this, along with proposed doors and roller shutter, have the potential to cause a noise nuisance. That is acknowledged in the TDC officer's report on this. The officer does also say they're happy to suggest the 7 a.m. time is okay, but I don't think the report explains why. But it does seem to me that's a bit much for the residents to expect. There is some concern from residents on Muir Road of the elevation overshadowing properties. That's the third point. Fourth one, it has been moved back from the perimeter, but residents are still concerned that it's not far enough back from the perimeter from the first one. And lastly, fifth point, it's about whether it actually meets policy QD02, I think it is, on general design principles. Ramsgate Town Council don't feel that it does, and there are a number of residents that also don't feel that it does meet the requirement of being in keeping with the design of the area. The developer has actually said they are quite willing to meet with residents and talk about concerns, and actually I think there is a way forward through that to kind of address all of these things. We weren't able to get that meeting done before it came here, but they are open to that, and I really think it would be much more desirable if residents' concerns were listened to, and if the application was amended to take those into account. So I don't think it's there at the moment personally, but I think there is a way to get there if we can set that meeting up, which myself and Councillor Moore would work on to make sure that residents could meet the developer.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkinson. Got it right. Did you want to come back on any of those points, Ian? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. To just come back with regards to the question about opening hours, this sort of followed on from Environmental Health looking at the scheme and considering, obviously putting forward, as you've seen from the comment, about potentially an 8 a.m. start. What we obviously then had to look at was, well, what governs the current use of the site, and from looking through the planning history, it's very clear that there isn't anything that is restricting the existing hours of use, and especially with regards to the current use of that area, it's considered that we wouldn't be in a position to put anything overly onerous on, because at the moment there is a sort of fallback position, which is that it can be used at the moment earlier than 8 and earlier than 7, but we do recognise the fact that by putting a warehouse there, it has, as I say, it has the potential to formalise it, and so the balance here is the 7 a.m. start, which I appreciate may be concerning to some residents, but in comparison to the existing situation, it's considered there isn't additional harm created from the restriction that we've proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. My only comments to this, realistically, is that one assumes they're going to use a forklift, and it's going to be a curtain-sided lorry, probably a juggernaut they call it these days, I don't know what they call it. Now, if the residents back onto that, why not, where those green lines are, have the door there, so that you can use curtain-side lorry can pull in against that, and you've got less movement of forklifts to unload that. Now, that might alter the way they use their warehouse, but at the end of the day, the warehouse is protecting the residents from the noise of the forklift and the lorry, and the reversing of the lorry to a degree, because they make a hell of a din when they do it at 7 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning. So, for my idea, I think the best solution for that would be to have the door on the side where the green lines work, because that's more practical and useful for a lorry to turn up in that area, because I know the area, we've all been to that nursery. And my other comment is, 7 o'clock I think is very early. If you're a tree surgeon or you're a builder, you're not really supposed to start before 7:30. And I think that realistically 7:30 is a more reasonable time than 7 o'clock. But that's my own personal view. But I think it works out that it needs to be turned round to protect the residents from the noise. And I think that could be a beneficial thing for the residents, really.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. So there are two things. I mean, one thing is obviously considering the proposal in front of us, in terms of the specific use of the roll shutter door, if obviously it's you're looking effectively to relocate the entrance to the north, you obviously then you change the impact from being potentially, I suppose, affecting more of the property where the mouse pointer is, properties on Muir Road, and you potentially then open up to I suppose, an increased level of disturbance to the properties on Brindle Grove. So you do, one way or another, there will be an impact. There is the additional fact that in this instance, what the green lines that you mention are trees. And so obviously if they had the entrance there, you would remove a line which you can just about see, again where the mouse pointer is here, a line of sort of scrub growth and smaller trees that do sort of delineate the open storage area at the moment from the car park of the garden centre. Again, the restriction with regards to time does restrict the use obviously of that warehouse to ensure that it doesn't go earlier than 7, and again it relates more to the extant use of the site that we think that restriction is acceptable. I take your point about 7:30 maybe being more appropriate, but again, given the fallback position here, which is any time use, and obviously potentially with builders materials, or depending on what the garden centre is doing, obviously you've got shed construction, all sorts of stuff. It could be used from 6 at the moment. Whether or not it is or not, I can't say. But I think this is the balanced approach with regards to the opening hours that we've put on in officers' view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Patmore.
Thank you, Chair. This is my ward, and I only live round the corner. I was in there today in the garden centre. I go quite often, and I can't understand it. Where the trees are, you keep moving the pictures. Where the trees are, there's a big lorry behind it. And then, as you're coming in, over there, and you come round where the lorries are going to come and the other bits, mechanics, there is the car wash. I don't know how they can get through. Might I propose we do a site visit and then we can actually see what's going on there? And although they have lowered the height of it, it was ginormous in the first place. So, I don't think they've given a lot up by lowering it a bit. But I really think I couldn't get round. I came down towards the car wash, which is there, and then the lorry's there. The trailer is there where the trees are, and I couldn't get round there to see because the car wash is there and they bring their cars in and out and park them there in the way. So, I think a site visit might help.
Thank you for that, Councillor Moore. I'll come to that if we have to. Councillor Hopkinson, want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on the noise issue again. I don't know if there's any good reason for this concern, but some residents are concerned about a possible change of use to what the warehouse is for, and concerned that it might involve actual more traffic flow. In which case, then I think then it'd be more urgent to sort of take note at this point. But again, that's something which could be addressed through perhaps residents' concerns could be addressed on that by actually meeting the developer. But I do think, I agree with Councillor Moore that site visit potentially is a way for committee to judge the extent to which these concerns are valid.
Councillor Hopkinson, Councillor Palmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to apologise to the Green Party because I don't have a green garden. Mine's all concrete and astroturf, so I don't visit this site very often. My query is, the current space we saw had pallets on it, and is that used by forklifts or just by pallet loaders? And if so, as an open space, that would be noisy in itself. The fact that that's now possibly being relocated into a structure is going to absorb that noise. So the only noise pollution you're going to have is actually unloading of the vehicles and then into the structure itself. I'm glad to see they've reduced it in size, so I did think it was rather large. I'm glad to see that the planning officers have agreed about light pollution, and much like Upton School, Obviously, when not in use, they can be turned off, and also they can have security lights, pyro, which means they only come on when intruders or whatever, or people that shouldn't be there are there for the security of the building, which they probably have to have for their insurance purposes anyway. I'm aware, and I did read the document where it said there was a car washing, and I think maybe that might mean that a site visit would be prudent, just to tick the boxes and make sure that how we perceive it, unloading and loading, will be okay. I'm not too sure about Councillor Hart's moving the doorway, because we're removing that green area, which I think we should keep. And obviously, if there's a condition that it's used purely for the garden centre, then that mitigates any problems for future use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Wing.
Yeah, I'm also on RTC, and we rejected this the first time, and we reject it again the second time. I think exactly the same with Upton School. We've got a neighbour issue here. We all want that nursery to survive, because we all want to buy our plants, with the exception of Councillor Moore. I'll bring you a potted plant later. And we all want that area to generate employment. But I do think there are a number of residents' issues, and actually issues for both RTC and me as a Ramsgate town councillor as well, that need to be addressed, and I think a site visit would be prudent. I mean, looking at that site now, it just seems to be a storage area rather than a storage area, obviously for pallets, rather than a storage area for goods. And the introduction of a warehouse, to me, does tell me that there is going to be increased activity of delivery of goods, which is a good thing, because it means that business is surviving. But on the flip side, we do need to try and, like they did at Upton School, try and get the developer to engage with the residents to try and address some of these issues, because I feel absolutely certain that they can be addressed in exactly the same way they were with Upton School.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Curry.
Yeah, I also think it's a good idea to take advantage of the fact that the developer is still willing to talk to the residents. I think that's a good sign. Maybe with the start time, maybe you could go back to 7:30. Or push forward to 7:30. So I think we should take advantage of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Cormacook.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. What worries me is that if we're not careful, we will actually go against the residents. We will increase their noise levels. At the moment, if they wished, they could go in there at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning with forklift trucks moving those pallets all over the place. That doesn't help residents, surely. So, to me, I actually think that if the noise is contained within a building, I would have thought that's better for residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cormacook. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I entirely agree. I think that the formation of a warehouse would contain the noise. I understand that residents don't like change, but as far as I can see, every effort's been made to meet their requirements. We'll have to look at what the application that's here before us today, and I can only see benefits from it, so I shall be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford.
I just wondered if officers could comment on the issue raised about the accessibility with regard to the car washing.
Obviously, I myself, as an officer, haven't been out on site. The case officer has been out on site, obviously, to take these images. It's worth noting as well that the location of where this warehouse is obviously has access that's currently used by the lorries, etc., that use it. So it's not considered that there is an issue with regards to accessing the site, particularly because obviously, again, it's in use at the moment, and that access therefore wouldn't necessarily change. But there's clearly going to be a delineation between public access to the car park and private access with regards to any vehicles delivering bits and pieces. So just to go through the images again, so again, this is the view to Muir Road at the moment. So that's the south of the site. Towards Brindle Grove, again, you can see where the general waste is currently kept. So we are effectively standing on where the warehouse would be. So you can see clearly this is where all the general waste is kept for the whole garden centre. So again, vehicles are accessing this location. So again, there's no issue in terms of conflict between public and private vehicle movements. And then this is the yard, so we are sort of standing with the warehouse location just behind us, and so you can see again the open space that's currently being used for vehicles to come in from the right hand side of the image, to access both the area to the in front of you that's gated off with obviously more of the plants that are actually out there, so that's actually part of the garden centre itself. But you can see again materials on the left hand side again, which will be related to the deliveries that occur in that area. So there isn't a concern from us that there's a conflict between where potentially the car wash is when you're looking at this proposal in comparison to obviously the current arrangement, basically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I think people are getting a bit confused with the fact of a warehouse. The point of a warehouse or a barn is that it keeps things dry, and therefore you can put different materials in there and use that as a facility to keep everything in a better condition. The downside to quite often a lot of barns and or sheds, and I have been in quite a few, believe it or not, is that a noise can echo and reverberate and make even more noise than an outside space. So if the building is going up and is just tin, then it will make more noise with a diesel forklift than it will with an electric forklift inside a building that is insulated, and that you have insulated foam cladding or whatever they're going to use. So it does make a difference. I mean, you put 12 cows in a barn, they make more noise than 12 cows outside, and that's just what happens. And you put a machine going down, a forklift going down a long barn, it will reverberate and reverberate and reverberate. So it does depend on how they're going to use it and what they're going to use it and what machinery they're going to use inside. And I think that has to be appreciated by everybody, because, a diesel forklift makes a row. It does make a row.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hart. I understand, but I'm passing over to Ian.
Just to come back on that again, I take your point, Councillor Hart. The balance here is the time condition. So that is how we're trying to address, again, what could be that formalisation of use. It could potentially, again, we wouldn't impose additional controls in terms of types of equipment used, because again, there's a free use related to the current planning unit of what they could use that area for at the moment in terms of the different equipment, etc. But the time condition is the mitigation to avoid there being a significant impact on neighbouring properties. Taking on board your point about 7:30 rather than 7, but again, following the looking at the history and speaking to environmental health, the balance here, in our view, is the 7 o'clock start. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor King.
Thank you. I'd like to have a site visit. I think sufficient concerns have been raised here tonight that I don't feel have been fully answered. I would also like to know what time, I know you say there are no time restrictions on it, but what time currently the garden centre is having people working in that area.
No. I think the answer there at the moment, Councillor Keane, is we're not sure. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just mention, living so close to this garden centre, and I use it quite a lot, that I've seen cars outside or lorries at 8 o'clock in the morning waiting to get in. It's locked up. I think it's 8:30 when they open. So it's going to be a bit of a shock from 8:30 in the morning to opening at 7.
I think you've just confused everything there, Councillor Moore. Really. Councillor Wing. No.
I think what Councillor Moore was trying to say, that presently no deliveries arrive after the garden centre opens. So there might, for me, having listened to everybody discussing, there are so many unknowns here. So if there are no deliveries, and that's what Councillor Moore is suggesting, there are no deliveries because they're sat outside waiting for the whole place to open at 8:30, then giving them 7 is going to have a reverse impact on the residents. what are they actually going to do? It's a warehouse. Are they using it to store? Are they using it to move equipment in? I think a site visit, and I definitely believe Councillor Hopkinson's trying to get the residents' concerns allayed by talking to the developer and the nursery to find out exactly what are they using it for, when do they want to use it, would help allay some of the fears of close neighbours. We've got exactly the same situation as the sports hall in Upton School, and I think the best way forward would be for a site visit and for the developer to a meeting to be engineered so that residents can talk to the developer and their concerns can be aired.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wing. Councillor Ballmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do we know what the products are for the warehouse, whether it's sandwich panels, insulation, etc.? Because obviously that will impact. If it's sandwich panels, it should absorb. I didn't see it, so I thought I'd ask Ian.
I don't have that information. I can check the application form potentially, but I believe that the information only extends to effectively a warehouse. Again, the use is not proposed to change, so again, what they could store in the warehouse could vary.
So would we make it a condition that it would be insulation in that structure?
So again, the proposal as it's been put forward, we've considered that to be acceptable related to environmental health's comment about, again, existing use and what they're proposing. So whether or not it's necessary, and that's the key test in terms of a condition to alleviate a harm, we obviously haven't put that forward because we don't think there's sufficient evidence given the extent use of the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ian. And I think members are aware that I am allowed to speak to the officers, and I think with advice as well. The advice is, members, I am quite happy to withdraw my proposal, which I gave you earlier, which was rightly seconded by Councillor Coleman Cook, and put forward and ask for a proposal for a site visit. Obviously there's a lot of feeling on this, and obviously there's a lot of unknowns, which is no fault of the officers at all. I know the site, I know what it used to be, and I think a few other people might remember what it used to be, but that's a different story. But hares running around with greyhounds behind them. So if I'd like to propose for a site visit, which you may recall I said would be on Friday the 1st of October. Proposer, please. Councillor. Yes, sorry. Must do it correctly. I've agreed as chair to withdraw the proposer. I must have a seconder, which I will come back to Councillor Coleman Cook, who will second it.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Got to do it properly, otherwise I get told off. Thank you. And you members, you agree? That'll be withdrawn. Okay.
So can I just ask the proposal you're about to make about a site visit, can it also include that the questions that we've raised here tonight are also addressed? I don't know if you were going to include that or not.
With a site visit, we haven't had one for I don't know how long, which is going to be a day out.
Fridays, I probably can't make it.
I know you are.
And I work Fridays.
What I would do, obviously, I speak to the planning officer because with site visits, if my memory serves me right, there are only certain things I can ask and also members can ask at a site visit. But by that time, which is October, a couple of weeks down the line, hopefully, Councillor, I don't know why, Hopkins, I've done it before, so I've got to apologise to you. I've got it in big enough letters down here. But perhaps by then you will have gathered a little bit more information which would be useful at a site visit. But the rules for a site visit for members who haven't been on them, they are again very strict. And you know, we don't decide anything on a site visit because it will come back to yourselves as members of a committee. Okay. So right. Sorry. Normally about 9:30. 9:30 on AM.
We'll send an invite now.
It won't be 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay. So, Councillor Moore.
Sorry, Chair. Having never been to a site visit, does every member of the planning committee have to attend that? Or if you can't make it, do you have to?
If, as in the past, so it's a long time ago now, but please, as many members, but please don't worry about substitutes. You don't have to do that. People do work, and yes, yeah. So Ian's just going to come back.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the reason why what we'd look to do is try and see if we can get any additional information before the site visit, but what we would always look to do is report back the following month when it comes back after the site visit, because obviously members can't attend, and so the issue with the site visit is for those members that are there to simply see if there are questions that come up on the site visit, we will try and answer them as officers with regards to the submission, but it's about not having a debate because fundamentally not all the members of the committee are there. So that's why the debate then saves for when it comes back to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Sorry, Chair. Will that come back in October meeting, or will it come back in?
Sure, yeah.
I'm not here for October, so.
All right. Okay, you'll miss out. Right, I need a proposer for the site visit, please. Councillor Hopkinson, I got it right that time. Seconded by Councillor Pat Moore.